This is a continuation in the history of Paducah Community College. And today, Dr. Donald J. Clemens, the Chief Executive Officer of the college, and I will be discussing the period of the 1960s when the college first came in as a part of the University of Kentucky system. Looking back in the student newspaper from the period, I noticed that on November the 15th, they had a feature article that profiled you, Dr. Clemens. You just had come on board, I believe, as of the 1st of July that year?
That's correct, John. Of course, you know I was here the previous 2 years academic dean, but I assumed my new function in July 1 of 1968.
And what was the first real opportunity that you had to influence or change the direction of the college and its programs?
Well, I think the first decision I made that affected educational programs came later in 1968 and 69, and it had to do with then we talked about our new library, which was moving from the second floor of the administration building into a new building.
The building itself had been started, I believe, originally under Paducah Junior College.
That's right.
And its plans had been finalized. The top floor was to be the library, and the lower floor was to be library expansion for future growth?
That's correct. Looking at the building today and going into the first level and trying to find a classroom is very difficult, because the first floor has inside classrooms and outside classrooms, which is very, very unusual. And that's because it had temporary walls, with the idea of taking these walls out as the need developed and as our enrollment went up, as it was projected to go up, and moving down to the second floor and using both floors as a library.
Well, the fact that we still had a Paducah Junior College board and you working with them in addition with the university gave you an opportunity to remold the purpose of this building. What did you envision for the new goal for the building, other than just library usages?
Well, looking back, many of us wonder why we changed our name, why we were Paducah Junior College from 1932 up until 1968 when we became Paducah Community College. And the reason for this was not only a name change as far as control with the university versus the Paducah Junior College Board of Trustees, it was a program change. The community college changed from junior, denoting the first 2 years of college, to community, reflected a more comprehensive offering of programs. And in the first level, we were looking at a remediation function, which we now call our Advancement Center. We were coming into a computer age at the beginning. We referred to in our last program that we were the first two-year college in the state to offer a program in data processing or computer science. So this was the second program designed in the building, was a computer center, which was made arrangements, of course, with the engineers to do this during its construction period.
Well, now, will that involve structural changes in the building itself, or just functional changes in the use of the building?
Well, there was some structural changes. For example, on the second level, which was to be the library level, we increased, I asked the Board of Trustees to change the plans and strengthen the floor and increase our shelf space for additional holdings. I felt that the second level would be adequate to meet all accreditation needs and, of course, our student needs in terms of library holdings. And fortunately, I was correct at that. So our first level became the library aspect, and later, of course, turned into also non-book collections. But that was our learning resource, typical library area.
On the second floor?
Yes.
And you mentioned this non-book. I believe as it progressed, it shifted from library, as you mentioned, to a broader, inclusive listing of the holdings. At the time, we were working under Title III with Murray State University as a cooperating institution. how did that help the local community for the library function of this building?
Well, I think this is an appropriate place to mention that this was the time we employed our excellent head of our library, who actually coordinated our learning resources, and that's Ginny Borawski. I learned of Ginny, and this time she was working in the Paducah city system, and felt that she had the ability and the talents and the energy level to move into a new type of library. And she was hired on our Title III grant to assist in the cataloging of both Murray State, of course, and PCC, and we call it a union. This was one of her first jobs, was to go to Murray and start the copying of the catalog indexing of Murray State, and therefore we had a combined catalog with offerings not only of PCC but Murray State.
Well, this cooperation between Murray and the college here continued, even though we had become a part of the university system. That in itself was rather unique, was it not?
Yes, it was, because I think that there's a natural rivalry between any institution or company if it's performing the same kind of service. I think it's a very healthy rivalry, but there was one between, and I think to a certain degree still exists, between Murray State University and the University of Kentucky.
Surely.
So by us becoming part of a system operated by the University of Kentucky, this sort of changed the relationship. But because I originally came out of graduate school to Murray and had many professional friends at Murray, and I wanted to continue the strong relationship, because you know, John, at that time, 60% of our graduates
went to Murray
State. So it was to the benefit of our students at PCC and to the benefit of Murray State to continue that relationship.
Well, in addition then to having a union catalog, I believe you also brought in a new concept in the use of equipment. And also because of that, we began to put into our catalog other media besides books. Would you comment on the advent of a relatively new idea that's fairly widespread now, that of the wet carol?
Yes. Again, I think we speak about the beginning of the technological era and the change. It was a very exciting period, you know, John, back in the early 70s, because our institution became broader, providing many more services than it did as a junior college. At the same time, technology was keeping abreast of this program movement, and the wet carol was an unusual new concept, but mainly it was talking about providing electrical power to a study carol that would allow the student to put a projector, audio, and to enhance the learning process through the new electrical technology.
Well, we've had some carryover in this from, well, from back as early as 1967 or even earlier, when as a part of your first responsibilities, you wrote a grant, I believe, that brought some specialists in to deal with problems in English and speech and counseling. So we took that idea as a special service to the student, and how did it expand from that nucleus into the present concept of our advancement center?
Well, you mentioned that era, and I think it'd be very good to mention some of the people too that came at that time. One of the individuals that I probably have had the fortune of being associated with, and that was Lillian Lowry. Lillian Lowry was at that time teaching at the high school, Murray State University High School, and I had met her when I was associated with Upward Bound project. As you know, I was connected with Upward Bound in its first initiation in the first years. And Lillian Lowry came, and she was a master teacher, a teacher of teachers. And she headed up what we called our developmental program. And with them, of course, our respected associate professor, Jerry Counts. Jerry had been a graduate assistant to me when I was teaching at Murray State, and a lovely young lady who worked in the remediation program in reading, Pat Trotter Bagwell, who later married and left Paducah. But these people came with me, and Ernest Vaughn, who
speech.
in speech. this concept from the developmental remediation function became what we now call our Advancement Center, and it has two sides to it really. One, remediation, but also acceleration, and that's why we changed the name to an Advancement Center, and that's a special enrichment program that we have at the institution where we use some of our more advanced academic students as tutors, and they work with some of the staff in the Advancement Center and accelerate for students who want to move more rapidly, more quickly into the discipline than the class is. So it has both functions now.
I believe we also began giving the ACT assessment about that time, which gave us some way of estimating in advance the performance of a student, recognizing potential areas of weakness and suggesting to them that they take advantage of these special enrichment services. And of course that still is the free services offered in the Advancement Center continue that tradition. Well, also I remember something about Lillian Lowry carrying on a movement that had started here earlier. I believe it was Jackie Clark, when she was teaching here as PJC, began a program with experimental theater. She had some programs, the Portrait of Lorca, she had an old morality play, Everyman, and she'd used the lecture hall in Rosenthal, which was not really suitable for theater. Lillian, with all of her energy, brought a new dimension to theater at Paducah Community College. Would you care to comment on the room that she took over in the New Matheson building?
Because Lillian had many, many talents. One, we've already talked about her teaching ability, but she also was a thespian, and probably, as you mentioned, the second person that attempted to offer any drama here at the college. And she took one of our large classrooms, and John, you know, when we spoke about the program area of the Learning Resource Center, we didn't mention the program that we're now utilizing, and that is our TV program.
Right.
That was built into this building, so really had three program areas: television, we had our developmental program, and then we had our computer center. And the TV started back, we had a black and white ITV, which is a closed circuit TV, campus only, back in 1969. Again, I think one of the earlier colleges probably to get into this new technology, and we used it for observing teaching. The faculty member, to begin with, used it to observe the quality of the job they were doing, and it was used mainly by the individuals. But Lillian took over one of our large rooms, and it was connected to the TV studio, so even then we could go ahead and televise, naturally for playback only, not for broadcasting, some of her plays. And you recall it was Theater 2, was not the connotation given to the program, and that's interesting because she was in room 2. We didn't dream, and I think that's just an unusual effect, I guess, of names, but now we're talking about Paducah 2. And we started with Theater 2, yes.
And as best I remember, it was, we later changed it around a little bit so that we could get a television camera in there to her theater so that she could observe plays in progress and use the television as a tool for rehearsal, so the student could see themselves in their own performing roles. You mentioned also the use of the closed circuit as a means of enhancing instruction. This was challenging to the faculty because you know, the first time they would look at themselves, you'd always see just the cosmetic effect. You'd be looking at the clothes you were wearing and others. But we expanded that idea of just observing by observing with a group of people who were trained to help the faculty member improve. Would you comment on how that program developed, faculty buddy system in effect?
Yes, I think that all of us are a product of our environment, our educational system, and during my graduate program I was exposed to some of the early experiences, what is called then and called now micro-teaching. And micro-teaching was developed at Stanford University, and it was used mainly as we started using it, and Lillian did, and that is to videotape a classroom experience with a teacher, and then and it was used in instruction of teacher education in the internship program originally. Mm-hmm. So I had learned of this technique, and I thought it was very, very valuable tool for faculty to review themselves and examine themselves, just like the audio playback is of value as far as what we're saying and the voice quality and the vocabulary, etc. So we use this mainly in teachers observing themselves, and then we developed, I think the faculty did, a committee of colleagues to go ahead and critique the individual teacher. This in no way was used for evaluation of teaching except for personal evaluation.
Well, the program still continues with the TIP program that Dr. David Krieger conducts on campus. So these things that began have matured and have grown to a permanent place in the life of the institution. Well, the other thing we mentioned briefly in passing was the advent of the computer age here. What did it mean when we got that IBM 1130 on campus? Was this something rare at the time? I noticed the newspaper had a picture of it as early as September of 1969. To have a computer in a two-year school? Was that unusual?
Yes, it was. At this time, as you know, I was writing the grants for Title III, and I had the audacity to dare include a computer as part of our federal grant application, and this was not a purchase of a computer, it was rental. And since I guess I was very fortunate that very few people knew too much about computers in education, so I was able to write a grant application and have it approved, and went ahead and had the building, as referred to, the Learning Resource Center, designed with electrical outlets and the power needed for a computer and auxiliary peripheral equipment, and it was funded. Fortunately, otherwise we'd have had a lot of power in that room without a computer.
And again, carrying on the idea of enhancing educational programs, having the computer, unlike the other institutions that had computers on campus, our students had hands-on access, which we felt enhanced the learning experience. Rather than taking a deck of cards to a hole in the wall and giving it to the computer operator, they actually got to run the programs themselves. So that's really the beginning of the present two-year program that we have in data processing that has expanded the computer use. We now have computers in Rosenthal as a part of the business program. We have the computers in the Matheson building as a part of the data processing computer. And computers have even invaded your building, have they not?
That's correct. Now, computers, of course, when we looked at it back at the 1130, we were talking about really a standalone computer using computerese as far as a language. And now we have what we call a mini computer. And then the PCs, a personal computer, which of course has invaded the homes, are the microcomputer where we can place on a desk of individual faculty member and also be used for administrative use.
Well, we did use the 1130 for administrative registration, for example, and we developed a consortium with Hopkinsville and Madisonville for joint sharing of our equipment with other colleges, and this idea had far-reaching repercussions. Well, looking back in the period of the 1969, I don't think we can forget also that the science building got a name during that period, as well as the new Library Learning Resource Center. What was so unusual about naming these buildings in early '69?
Well, the Board of Trustees had an unwritten policy not to name a facility for someone who was living. And Mr. Tom Waller, who was on the original board, one of the founding members, and Robert G. Matheson, better known as Dean Matheson, had, of course, just recently retired the year before after 30 years of service to the institution. And the board felt that they should make an exception to this ruling. And I can recall the meeting that Mr. Waller abstained. And the board decided to, while both gentlemen were living, to name the science building, which was very befitting to Mr. Waller, who was an overall well-educated person and interested in the arts and the sciences, to name it in his honor. And R.G. Matheson, of course, had a lot of involvement with the structural planning of the library building, and it was very befitting, too, because of his love for the young people of this area and his pursuit of excellence in education, to name the building in honor of him.
Well, we also did something in 1969, our first year as full participation as the community college, that we never have duplicated. That was the year, well, there was a special issue of the student newspaper in March of 28th of that year that's devoted to our national champions. Our basketball team won the junior college tournament in Hutchinson, Kansas. But there has been, under your direction, a significant change in the direction of athletics here. Would you care to comment on that movement?
Well, I think first, before I do, John, I think that many of us in our lifetime are fortunate to be at the right place at the right time, and I think this was true with me. All the hard work that Sonny Hawes had put into the athletic program and developing a championship basketball team climaxed in the end of the first year of my tenure as Chief Executive Officer of the college, and many of the years that Dean Masson put in supporting athletics and getting it to a championship level. I happened to be here. It wasn't fair. It wasn't fair to Dean for him not to be in his position, but it just happened that way. We expand our athletics during the years a little bit later, and we also had difficulty offering both separate girls intercollegiate athletics and men. We felt that we should offer more sports, but offer more co-educational. So rather than have the typical girls' PE and men's PE, we moved into sports that would be offered to both sexes at the same time.
And so really we not de-emphasized basketball, but we expanded other programs. You began the women's basketball program, and we'd had baseball teams under PJC, but here a bequest came to the institution that allowed you to re-evaluate and to expand the offerings of athletics. Would you care to talk about the Stewart bequest?
Yeah, John, as you know, during this period we developed a master plan, but one of the lacking offerings on our campus were having facilities for intercollegiate athletics, but just as important and sometimes more important to the numbers was intramural sports. So we did receive a large gift of approximately $100,000, and I discussed this with the board, and they approved constructing 6 tennis courts, which, and this of course, remember too, was in the advent of a revival, I guess, towards tennis, and a baseball field. So this did give more opportunities to our students, not only for intercollegiate competition, but for intramural.
Well, you mentioned intramurals. I remember you had a rather interesting experience. It kind of was a spillover for coming into the community college system. Something about the bookstore and the fact that we had space in the women's dressing room that was not being used, and you combined these two things into a new program for the college.
Yeah, we were going through our expansion as far as enrollment. We were getting to the point really with two classroom buildings, maybe the first level, which was more special programs, LRC, to being pushed for space, and a very practical thing came on, and that was that when we were at Paducah Junior College, we could have all of our printing, including we never did print a college newspaper on this campus. All of our printing needs were taken care of local, private printing operations. But being part of the University of Kentucky, we could not follow this same method. At that time, the printing laws in Kentucky were fairly rigid, that you could not use vendors for this. I think there had been abuses over the years, and this law was passed. So we desperately had to get some printing done, and the only space we had available was the girls' dressing room, and this is where we started our initial printing operation. That's right.
And now, of course, we have this magnificent facility in the Student Center Fine Arts Building that printing is, the newspaper is there. We have the Student Center there, and it allows this program that started in a corner of the gym to, again, contribute to the life of the college. The newspaper has continued, it's won awards, and we have more hands-on participation with it than is in the case of some other institutions. Along with this, you had mentioned the development of a master plan. Well, the master plan, that began when, about 69, and how has it progressed since that time?
All right, every institution, like any individual, should have goals and purposes. Each one of us, as we know, we develop what our objectives in our life should be. And I think an institution, educational institution, should have the same kind of plan. So the master plan encompasses the physical things, the buildings, to reflect an educational philosophy, or what are we going to offer this institution. And when I came here, it was pretty obvious to us after maybe a year or two, and this is the early years of the Vietnam conflict, that we had inadequate areas for students, student activity area, if you like, or a student center. The other was that our fine arts program, you recall at that time that the music was in a house trailer. And the art was in another temporary building, originally purchased to be a maintenance building, but was housing art. So these were two obvious needs in our master plan, and the other we've touched on a little bit were adequate auxiliary type services, such as printing, such as our bookstore. So these things were developed.
And other access roads.
Yes, and the other thing was that we needed to have an additional outlet to the campus for obvious reasons that are very much in front of us today.
Right. And this plan has then been implemented. You have reached the completion of the access road. The Student Center building is in place. The arts building is now M&O, and the arts and music have been gathered into the Student Center building. At least one of the few minutes we have left, there's one other addition to the physical plant. That is the amphitheater. Now that was a bequest, was it not, in the memory of a family?
Yes, John. The Finkel family, Mr. Finkel was the first chairman of the Paducah Junior College Board of Trustees. And his family, his daughters, and his son-in-law, Marshall Niemer, who has served on our board for close to 25 years. In fact, I think he's been on longer than 25 years. Asked the institution what could they do as a family to honor their father. And during the early years of the Vietnam period, I had an opportunity to visit some of the institutions and had seen the amphitheater, which was an outdoor area, which was a multi-purpose area. And I thought it would definitely lend to the period of the time for free expression of students, as well as we've done, and you know, had graduations in our amphitheater. So this was really a dedication and honor of Mr. Finkel.
But also you mentioned what our topic will be for our next examination of the development of Paducah Community College, the tremendously challenging events of the Vietnam era, the question of student rights, the question of access. So we will look at that in our next session. Thank you.
Thank you.